Well, I ran my first D&D homebrew game last night. It was a one-shot, of course, and I think it went pretty great. There were some things I didn't like about it, and overall, it was tons of fun. So, guess what we're talking about today on the vlog? For the vlog here today, I'm going to talk a little bit about what worked last night and what didn't work last night and what I learned from it overall. I've mentioned here that I was planning to do a one-shot. I've also mentioned that I've sort of been working on developing my own first one-shot that I really want to publish at some point, and that's been this kind of like slow ongoing process, and it's been awesome. And last night was certainly some proof of that. I felt like overall the the story, if we want to call it that, or the premise, the setup, the build up, and the, I guess, resolution, they all worked pretty well together, and it felt great. It felt awesome. And on top of that, my sort of guest stars, or the group that I had gotten together for this one shot of sort of irregulars, if you will, was it turned out to be fantastic. And of course, what I really mean by irregulars, I'm being silly and cheeky. What I really mean is that this was a group that I had not gamed with before, by and large. There were two individuals that I have been in a game with, or at least have some interaction online with, and virtually, and have talked with and so forth, and the others were all sort of fresh and new in my experience. I have been building relationships with them through Discord and so forth, and they all said, hey, a one-shot sounds great, sign me up. And then they built some characters, we got together last night, and we played it out, and it was great. Everyone was fantastic. The role-playing was amazing. And I almost, so this is actually probably the first thing that I learned. I kind of almost got a little carried away at the beginning of the session because I was enjoying the role-playing so much. I think one of the things that made the session last night kind of really work was that I did my best to set the expectations at the beginning of, like, what the tone was going to be, how the play would go, and what I wanted to achieve in the game, in the session. I let them know right out the gate, like, hey, this is all kind of new material, and I don't know how it's going to work, and so please bear with me. And I'm grateful that they were all patient for a couple reasons. Most of the players were pretty new to Roll20, and I've realized that I'm actually going to do, I don't know if it's going to be a vlog video or maybe an extra video, just generic general video that I'm going to do. I'm going to do my own version of, like, how to Roll20, I think, because that's, I've learned a bunch of stuff and it changes over time, but like right now, the way things work on Roll20 have been consistent for a while. And one of the fun things for me, I guess, was that I started the session by doing sort of a crash course in how to use Roll20. So that slowed things down in the sense of, like, if this was a sort of a formalized one-shot, you wouldn't want to spend the first half hour, 45 minutes or whatever doing that necessarily. I used it as sort of a compressed session 0, again, setting the rules and guidelines and expectations and that kind of thing, which I think is really important in any game group. And then I also, of course, did this crash course for Roll20. And I realized that if I had a video done already ahead of time, like a pre-roll, or it was already established on the internet, and it was a new group, and somebody, either one or multiple individuals, were not familiar with Roll20, I could have directed them to that video and said, okay, before we play, watch this video so you know how to use Roll20. That would have taken away some of the time in the game session of having to go over that. And so that way, if someone is pretty well versed in Roll20, they're not sort of sitting around twiddling their thumbs. So already 2 lessons learned right out of the gate. And that is, again, this was why this was such a good experience for me. And I think it was a good experience for the players too, because at least one of the players had not done any virtual gaming as far as, like, ttrpgs. They played D&D, like, in person with people, but had no experience of doing any kind of, like, streaming or Discord or Zoom or anything like that. So Roll20, Fantasy Grounds, none of this was in their experience. So in that regard, this was great because it was nice for me, because I love doing that. It was nice for me to be able to sort of introduce someone else to this style or way of playing. That was cool, and that also was one of the learning experiences. I think it's good to have if not a one-on-one, have a quick session if you can beforehand to make sure that everybody is on board technically. Their mic works, they know how things work. Again, this was a learning experience, which is great, and I'm super stoked that I did this, and I'm also I'm glad that we didn't stream it, because nobody would have wanted to watch us figure out the tech issues. It didn't take all that long. It actually took about the time that I had allotted for it, a little longer than I would have liked, but not as long as it could have, which I think was great. So that was beautiful. And once that was done, we got into the meat and potatoes of actually playing the game, which was obviously the best part. and again, it worked out great. I left myself a lot of freedom in how I set up the beginning of this little short adventure. And I think that worked well because I was able to improv a bit and also interact with the characters and get a sense of how everyone worked and how they were going to handle their character and what their character was going to be interested in and so forth. And that was great because even the beginning, even the opening sequence allowed for every single one of the players to kind of have a moment of like getting engaged, getting involved. And for me, that was sort of my biggest concern going into this as a DM, was like, what if somebody's a wallflower? What if somebody is like hanging back and not really participating or contributing? Like, that was a legit concern for me. And with this group, it wasn't an issue at all. Everyone got involved. Everyone was active and engaged from the very beginning. And I was like, what more could a DM ask for? I was so stoked. And not only that, there were several different styles of play, which is cool. Like, not everyone was full on with like a voice or like speaking in character every sentence they said or any of that kind of thing. So it was cool because there were these different styles of play being exhibited by each of the players. We had 5 players, and at the same time, it worked beautifully. And from my perspective, it worked beautifully because everyone's different sort of style of play lended this neat element to their character, to the character in the game. And I love that. That was my perspective from it. So why I was having so much fun and sort of got a little carried away at the beginning, because I just wanted everybody to keep role playing. So third lesson was that because this is designed as a one shot, I really need to be more concise with the setup. With how much I allow for things to play out in the beginning. Then we took a break. Once the sort of the opening, let's call it the opening sequence, played out. So we did our setup with like the tech stuff and my expectations, session 0-ish kind of thing, which led us into character introductions, followed by, I'm going to call the setup, right? The opening sequence of events, which was fun and wonderful and great role-playing. Loved all of that. Then we took a break, right? Everybody, stretch, get, refreshed drinks and all that if you needed water or what have you. And that rolled into, after we came back from the break, let's call it 3 more encounters. And that's another lesson. I definitely liked doing more of, each encounter having, and by encounter, I mean to have an obstacle or a combat and a role-playing sequence. So the whole first half of the session was like the first encounter. And it could have been, we could have said it was 2 encounters because there were sort of like 2 scenes, if you will. One scene out on the street, one scene in a tavern. But that was all sort of blended together into the setup. Whereas the second half, after our break, was more of like once the physical part of the adventure sort of began, where the characters knew what they needed to sort of do or explore or investigate. Then once that was understood, that's when they sort of got on with that part of the adventure, which I think is definitely like the second half of the adventure. And I learned at least, so the fourth thing I learned was I learned a few things about it. One is that what I've sort of designed could easily be expanded into a longer adventure, like a few sessions, or even like a little mini campaign, like a nice arc, a nice story arc. Or if I run, or not if, because I'm going to, when I run this one shot again, I definitely want to shorten the intro sequence so that the second, let's call it the second part, the second part can be I can give more time, allow more time for the discovery. And again, I don't want to spoil this because I know some people that watch this my vlog would have a good chance of playing this one shot with me. So I don't want to spoil anything. I'm trying to just speak in code a little and still give all the juicy bits. So the second part needed a little more time, and the second part, I'm going to say the second half had 2 parts. And the first part needed more time, and then the last part, I definitely had that felt like the flow moved well, but I was feeling rushed. And then we started having like tech issues, or let's call it lag, as that's really what it was. It wasn't tech issues, it was lag with Roll20. Roll20 started bogging down and getting slow, and then it was like taking longer to open the NPC sheets, and it was taking longer to, just do silly stuff like even you need saving throws and whatnot. So biggest lesson I learned from the session last night: have everything in paper and digital versions. Because if I had like all the NPC stat blocks, and if I had all of my information that was online, whether it was in a spreadsheet or whether it was in a Word doc or actually in Roll20, built in Roll20, if I had a physical backup, a sheet of paper or several sheets of paper with the same information, I could have kept the game moving without having hiccups, without having lag from Roll20 be an issue and slow the game down. That was the biggest takeaway for me in running this one shot, because I run it digitally, right? In person, I think there was very little. I think in person, excuse my stuttering, I think in person what I learned is that little bit less time for, let's call it Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. A little bit less time for Act 1, a little bit more time for Act 2, and Act 3 could be variable. Easily variable, and it was, and I think that worked, because I think it sort of set a tone, created an ambiance. It all worked, I think, really well. The let's call them the villain, bad guys, and the monsters, and what was encountered that led to combat, to me, I think played out the way I had hoped, in that it was interesting, challenging, but not overwhelming. And it just felt like it all worked. It felt like overall everything worked. I feel so lucky because like everything came together so nicely, with the minor exception of the lag. That was it. Like, to me, the real problem last night, the only problem, if there was one, had nothing to do with the players, nothing to do with, I don't think, how I sort of have designed the one shot. I really feel like the only kind of big issue last night was lag from the internet or from Roll20 or from whatever it was. That's it. In my opinion, I hope my players give me feedback after the fact of like what worked, what didn't in specific, because I'm an open book. There's no ego about this. I just want to learn and improve. And so if there are things that I did poorly that I can improve, I definitely want to know about all of that. So, oh my goodness, gosh, kudos to every one of the players. They were phenomenal. I may release this at some point as a YouTube video. We did record it, we talked about it. The thing is, I'm like, I don't want to spoil it. So I'm probably going to hold it back for a while. Maybe a month or a couple months until I get a chance to maybe run this for a few others, or maybe a few other groups, maybe at least one, possibly two other groups I'd love to take through. And then once I've done that, I'll probably post these on my YouTube channel. So sometime coming in maybe spring or something like that, you might see some of these one-shots on the YouTube channel. Alright, enough about me and my experience. I really want to quickly just wrap this up and conclude with some comments about the players, because they were just so wonderful. Everyone, like I had said earlier, everyone had a chance to shine. Everyone's character was unique and different, and that's in spite of the fact that we had 2 warlocks in the party, which beforehand I was kind of like, oh, this is going to be interesting. But the warlocks were distinct because each one of them had a different pact, right? And each one of them sort of played their character slightly different. Mechanically, they had some of the same, let's call them combos, which was fine because their personalities, the way they portrayed their characters was completely different. And they had sort of, let's call it maybe a different role within the group, which worked out great. Yeah, everyone had an amazing moment of like taking the spotlight, doing something cool. At least I thought they did. I hope they did, because I thought they did. There was some great spell casting, some more effective than others. Here's what I loved about the spell casting. The spell casting served its purpose, which was, one, it just like locked down part of the final combat, which was cool. Like, that was super cool to see that work. Like, yeah, controller, do your thing, go for it. And then on top of that, the one melee focused player that we had took on like the big sack of hit points and had this sort of like toe-to-toe with this thug, and it was just cool. It was awesome to see that. So she got to be cool and do her monk stuff, although she took the biggest beating in the group and actually went down twice, not once, twice went down. So the bard got to shine because he was able to like bring her back, and like he was supporting everyone and giving them that kind of like cheering and his bardic inspiration and all, and so it was a juicy session where everybody got a chance to do their thing. We got to see some shape shifting from our druid, who also was able to, again, one of the spellcasters in the group that just locked down the battlefield. It was so cool to see these players, with these brand new characters, just absolutely jump into the role and into the character so beautifully, and bring it out to the virtual table in such an entertaining, fun, and interesting way, and effective too. They were all so effective, which was amazing. Like, nobody ended the session feeling like, wow, that build kind of sucked, or wow, that I didn't play very well tonight, or anything like that. I don't think they did, and for sure from my perspective it seemed like there was none of that. Everybody was just like on point, and that made it so much fun. Wow, it was so good. So big learnings, yeah, it was so much fun. Couple things I realized should be handled before the game even starts. A couple things I realized that I can do to speed the game along, just in the sense of, like, again, having a physical copy, being a little better prepared, sort of, I guess is what we could say, which I talk about all the time. And just, gosh, have fun. We had fun. I had fun, and ultimately that's the goal of this wonderful hobby. So thanks for tuning in. Check out one of the videos. Keep rolling 20s until I see you at a table someday. And remember, my friends, it's your game. Play your way. and that worked out well as and of course the comp